Well, we said it last week, the tropics are heating up, and that's exactly what we have going on. I thought we might get lucky and wait till the middle of the month, but we did have the stalled frontal boundary we were watching that has produced a storm that is Dexter, and it is way up here. As expected, this is going to be a fish storm, but we're going to have to keep a close eye on it. It's actually the area of low pressure is about right there, so I misdrew on the first one, but you get the idea. This is going to be continuing to follow the Bermuda High steering flow and work out into the Atlantic, but you can see how it has modified the Bermuda High just a touch here, pulling this streamer a little further off to the north. We also have another piece of energy down here. We're going to be keeping a close eye on that because you can see how that tropical wave is bending things around the high pressure situation that is situated just about there. So that's trying to steer this up in that direction. So if this little tropical wave, really that's the tail end of the Tut here going across the Atlantic, that's going to break off, and if it interacts with a little weak area of low pressure still situated on that frontal boundary, then we could see another area of low pressure develop. So we're going to keep a close eye on that. We're also going to keep a close eye on if this piece really just misses this entirely, which is possible. You could have a little weak surface low develop here, work up into the Carolinas, and then this piece could work something like that, or even down into here. If this sneaks into the Gulf somehow, say down into here, then we'll have to keep a close eye on it. I don't think that that's all that likely at this point in time, but it's something to consider. Some of the modeling at least suggesting that possibility, around a 2% chance of that happening. So that is something to watch. The other thing to watch is way out here as well. I'm going to try to get rid of all of that. Let's get rid of the lightning as well. Turn all the lightning off, and then I'll turn this off so that we can get rid of all that stuff popping up, as well as the skits. So all of that activity going on over here, this is associated with that stalled frontal boundary. You can see that that's what's bringing us all of the moisture and rain as of late. There's also a mid-level low that's hanging out about right there. So we've got plenty of flow working across that boundary. There's more of an upper level low as you work further up here. It's actually further north than that. It's helping to pull all this moisture north as well, which is the reason why we've had several days of heavier rain across the panhandle, and we have several more to go. But thankfully, we are going to see this boundary basically eat it, start to dissipate, and then we're just dealing with the moisture that's going to try to work this way off of that wave, as well as watching whatever tries to develop somewhere around here. So we'll get more to that in a second. Let's go over to the wave that's coming off of Africa. We've got one that's situated about right here. The models like to do this time of year where they're really, really excited about something until it comes off the coast of Africa and until it starts to develop. Really wouldn't buy too much into it. So we won't know much about this wave until we get later on into the week. And the reason for that is this wave is going to stand up. That's going to be thanks to where it's running in. You can kind of see how the flow is going here. So this wave is going to stand up. It's going to stand up like that. And as it does, we should see something on the north side of that wave try to get going. When that happens, then we'll have to watch where that wave goes and then what's modified off to the north. If Dexter's still up there and we still have this piece of energy hanging up like that and things are flowing like that, well, then it goes exactly like the Euro. We see something develop and then work off like that, and then that wave's not an issue at all. If it somehow or another evades developing before that time period and doesn't develop until it gets out here or somewhere back in here, then that wave becomes more of a concern for the southeast because it probably works toward the Bahamas, possibly even toward the southeast. I don't think that this wave has any chance to get into the Gulf. If it does, it's got to work across South Florida and then it's headed over toward Texas. We'll talk more about that in a second as well. But you can still see there's plenty of dry air here. Our Tut, as mentioned last week, it's starting to flatten out. It doesn't look as much north-south oriented. It's much more east-west. And when that happens, we just don't see that affecting the tropics all that much. Our high pressure certainly has retreated. You can see the steering flow here still somewhat like that. And working across, and then we've got a couple of other high pressure extensions to that Bermuda High that is working back that way. So that's helping to move everything around. But as mentioned, we've got plenty of activity out there now, and that is certainly the reason why we are seeing this big jump in activity. So we're going to jump over here to links, and we're going to show you basically what the National Hurricane Center has. We'll jump out of that, and we'll get you to the Eastern Pacific first. There is now Henriette out there. We've lost Gil and Iona. So the party continues in the Eastern Pacific. It looks likely that we're going to see another area of interest develop over the coming week. That's part of the reason why I don't think that first wave has any chance to make it into the Gulf of Mexico, because we're probably going to see this piece of energy develop. That's going to put shear across the Caribbean and southwestern portions of the Gulf, but it does leave the northeastern portion of the Gulf still available, so we'll have to keep an eye out to see if this wave can sneak underneath it. National Hurricane Center giving it a 50% chance of developing. I think that's probably pretty fair at this point in time. If this wave doesn't start to get its act together, say by Thursday or Friday, you're going to start to see the chances of development really diminish on that. This wave actually has a much higher chance of developing much sooner. It's just a low percent chance because things really have to interact perfectly. There's only a marginal environment here. The overall steering flow is going to be pushing that toward landmass pretty quickly once you start to get towering cumulus, because as mentioned before, the flow at different levels is different. So things that are weak are steered by the surface, and you can see the surface flow here is generally from west to east. That is or east to west, which is our trade winds. And then once you get up into the mid latitudes, it is from west to east. Again, trade winds working around that, working with the jet stream as well, which is higher up in the atmosphere. When tropics happen, you actually tap into multiple levels. So when a hurricane develops, it is actually reaching up through multiple levels of the atmosphere. The taller it gets, meaning the stronger it gets, the more likely it's going to be impacted by the mid and upper level winds, and that steering becomes the dominant steering for the storm, because a vertical column in a hurricane is what you want if you want to sustain a hurricane. So that means you're looking at multiple levels for multiple flows for the overall steering environment, which means as a storm is developing, you get different steering flows for that storm. So as we're looking at the Atlantic right now, you can see the activity out there. There's not a whole lot going on other than Dexter, which is already formed. And again, that's going to continue to be a fish storm. And you can see how that has modified the Bermuda High already, which is really what the wave here is suggested to do, is basically follow that modification and that curve. As it develops, it works up, and then it follows up to where Dexter is and stays out to sea. If it somehow or another gets on the south side of this envelope, whatever you want to say, and it ends up on the south side of that, then we'll have to worry about it approaching the southeast as well. There's still plenty of inhibiting factors out there. Again, you got the Bermuda High, you have plenty of Saharan dust still ongoing, so any wave that is out there is going to have to deal with this, or it's going to have to jump across this Bermuda, or rather this Saharan dust that is in place. So in putting all of this into action, you can see how our GFS and Euro, because I actually have them overlaid, are working together there. So we see our tropical wave right on the back end of the Tut here, breaking off a piece of that energy, trying to interact with the leftover frontal boundary that is across South Georgia as well as South Carolina, and then across the Panhandle here. If those two things come together and can work together, then you can get an area of low pressure to work up to the Carolinas. Then you can see how the GFS resolves this area of low pressure. Basically says it's going to fight off through the Saharan dust, it's going to catch the steering flow, it's going to miss that modification in the trough because it has a much weaker Dexter overall. Euro has a much stronger Dexter, which modifies that Bermuda High. And then this wave works toward the South Carolina coastline and then kind of stalls from there. The following wave that will be coming off later this week toward this weekend is a much further south track, but it is a wave that is still well over Africa. So the models are just guessing at this point in time, which is going to lead me to my next point, which is don't follow the hype, especially in the long range, 240 hours out or plus, because you're talking about waves that either A, don't exist, or B, are model projections, or C, errors on top of errors on top of errors on top of errors on projecting where that storm is going to be. So everybody and their brother now has a meteorological page on Facebook or on some kind of social media website, and they're saying a hurricane's going to hit Maine, a hurricane's going to hit Virginia, a hurricane's going to hit North Carolina, a hurricane's going to hit Florida at blah, blah, blah time, and it's 14, 15, 16 days down the road. Well, guess what? Doesn't happen. Most of those solutions never happen. And the way these hypers work is that they just keep pushing out every single scenario until one of them plays out. And then when that scenario plays out, they go, look, I was right. I was first. I was right. Ha ha, to all the other people. And in reality, they didn't forecast at all. They never gave you a forecast. All they did was post every tropical solution of every run of every model. And then when one of them ends up verifying, because eventually one of them will, then they go, I was right. In reality, they were never right. They didn't tell you anything. They didn't educate you at all. They just posted every solution in every scenario. So that's the way most pages work. Most pages are not going to give you a forecast. Most pages are not going to tell you what's going on. They're just going to describe the current situation, and then they're going to show you every solution. That's not really a forecast. So that's the end of my rant on that. Let's go back to what is happening here. So the GFS, again, is going to guess at a lot of things, especially in the long run, and it's doing so already with this first wave as it approaches the Carolinas. Is this a possibility? Sure. Is it a possibility that this ends up further south and ends up in the Gulf? Maybe. Is it a possibility that it catches that first trough and ends up in the Atlantic? Yeah, that's also a possibility. So until we get a low to start to develop, we really don't know the steering current, the steering flow, or how that wave is going to interact with everything else that's out there. So until there is an area of low pressure to actually watch, everything is guesswork, especially in the models. So don't buy into those long-range solutions. As we look at the overall setup, we can talk about how things could play out if. So if it's a weaker system for longer, this first wave, then I could plausibly see a further south road happening. If it is a stronger system early, it's certainly going to take that first exit and that trough out into the Atlantic. That's what the Euro suggests. If it is somewhere in between, then it's probably something that catches the steering flow, still has to deal with that Saharan dust, and then we'll see if it ends up developing once it's on the backside of that Saharan dust and into more favorable conditions as it gets closer to the Bahamas. That is a real possibility, but it is on the low end, so putting that at about 20%. The following wave looks likely that it's going to take a much further south track. That is toward the middle of the month here, so we'll have to keep a close eye on that as we do get a little bit further down the road. So again, as we are looking at the overall flow here, what I see setting up is really a pattern that wants to direct things toward South Florida, and like I said, a pattern that wants to direct things toward Texas as well. And then you have these upper level lows that are situated further up in the jet stream that are working down. You've got another wave right there. I'm not seeing another wave until you get all the way over here, but with those and the jet stream working down and occasionally dipping across, thanks to any low pressure systems, say like Dexter here, we can get modifications in the Bermuda High, and we can get these exits. So these little ramps where these waves want to come and develop, and then they just catch that exit, they get pulled further off to the north. Where I think that is going to be a likely occurrence many times this year. I think that's going to be on the eastern seaboard here. I think that's going to be on the other side of Bermuda as well. So I think we will see plenty of waves try to develop out here and then catch that first exit. If they don't, I think they'll catch the second exit. They may threaten the eastern coast, but they likely do that recurve and stay off the eastern seaboard as well. Stuff that does have real chances is whenever we have a stronger high pressure system that sets up like this and directs things across. And when that happens, we're probably going to have a setup like that, which again kind of steers things in that direction. So across South Florida here, and then back over toward Louisiana and Texas. So that is really the setups that I would be more concerned about when we see these waves that start off on this much further south track on the modeling, and then end up something like this, because I think that that's much closer to reality, and then work across Texas and into Louisiana, or work across South Florida and then into Louisiana and Texas. There will also be concerns whenever you get these brief breakdowns in the ridge here and stuff develops and then goes like that, especially if you can get closer to the U.S. coastline. Then you can get these runs up into the Carolinas, work across the Outer Banks, or even up into the Northeast. And for those that say the Northeast coast doesn't get tropical systems, well, actually on return period on average about once every 30 years up in Maine, as well as about once every 30 years across, actually less than that, about once every 20 years from Long Island and southern coast there into Massachusetts and Rhode Island, as well as New Jersey. So long overdue actually for a tropical system to work up into the Northeast or work up into Maine as well. Those are all real possibilities. We just haven't had a pattern that's kind of playing out the way I see things play out this summer, which is going to be a lot like this, where these waves are going to want to continue to try to do that. And I think that opens up the eastern seaboard quite a bit. So I think that is where the concern will be out of these waves. And then for the Gulf here, we'll be watching, as we always do, stuff that really goes through the keyhole here, as well as stuff that ends up on the Windward and Leeward Islands here down in the Lesser Antilles and works across the Caribbean. Stuff works across the Caribbean, it's much more likely that it gets pulled north into the Gulf Gulf. So that's where the concern will come from that. This is typically a much later in the season track. As we go through the peak season stuff, we usually get stuff that works like that. The last 5 years, 7, 8 years or so, things have wanted to do this as opposed to doing that. And that has really opened up the Gulf as real solutions. And the reason why the Gulf has been just so battered as of late is that we just keep getting these further south solutions as opposed to stuff that wants to go a little bit further off to the north. But where I see tracks playing out this year, I actually think that that will be a little more favored. So certainly would be a little more on guard in South Florida this year as opposed to years in the past, because I think that this is stuff that could really play out this year, is working across the Bahamas up into South Florida and then across into Texas and Louisiana, maybe up into Mississippi as well. Something a little more traditional than what we have seen as of late. I think that flow and the setup this year looks a lot more traditional than years past. So that's where things are right now. Like I said, they have gotten active. The tropics have heated up, certainly have quite a bit of activity out there at the moment. And definitely stuff that we are keeping a very close eye on across the Atlantic, but still a ways to go. As we go throughout this week, we're going to watch 2 waves. We're going to watch this wave closer to home here, see what happens with that. Just a 30% chance of developing, but we could see that trend up, especially if the models start to pick up on this more and more. I think 30 to 40% is probably the correct estimation at this moment in time. And I think 40 to 50% is probably the better correction on this wave out here. I think 50% might be overdoing it a little bit. The models are starting to back off on this as it has to interact with dry air. So keeping a close eye on it for sure. Definitely want to keep an eye on the following wave that comes out as we get later on into this week. That would be closer to this weekend. But it is August. That is the time of year that we get into peak season. That's August 20th to October 20th. So you want to continue to check in because things can change very, very quickly in the tropics, as we know. And as we also know, it only takes one storm to make it a bad season. So you want to keep up with the latest, be prepared, stay ahead of the game, know what's going on. If you're prepared, you certainly won't be scared when the event comes. If you're not prepared, that event, when it comes, is definitely going to panic you. So prepare ahead of time. That way you have a peace of mind. You know what you're going to do. You have a plan, and you take that. You don't take that for granted at any point in time during hurricane season, because like I said, things can happen fast. They can change quickly. We can see storms develop and become majors in less than 3 days. So you want to continue to check in. You want to do that. As of right now, nothing all that much concerning, but we will be keeping a very close eye on this wave, especially if it does try to end up in the Gulf. If that's going to happen, it's going to be closer to about the 8th, 9th, and 10th by the time. So the end of this week toward this weekend. And obviously the models will start to trend into that solution if that becomes a little more likely, as opposed to this just being a piece of energy that works up into the Carolinas, and this just being a piece of energy that gets stretched along the next frontal boundary, which just brings us more rain. So over the next 10 days, no tropical trouble here in the Panhandle, but certainly the tropics are picking up. So we're going to continue to keep a close eye on it.